Transforming Education by Empowering Dyslexic Children to Thrive. So I want to talk about the deep dive into the science of reading and how it affects the brain. Sally Shaywitz talks about the different parts of the brain, and I mention it in my book on page 36 of Dyslexia, A Trait of Genius. There are several brain parts that still have trouble connecting, making connections to each other. One is the parietal lobe, the language center on the top of your head. One is the temporal lobe, the auditory perception and speech and language comprehension, and visual recognition, which is above your ear in the back. And then the occipital lobe, which is in the lower back area of your brain, which covers the visual information and controls visual perception, sending info to the other parts of the brain. So we weren't born with a reading brain like we were to see and hear. Reading is a man-made thing that we invented after we got the printing press with the Industrial Revolution. My book, A Message of Hope, How Music Enhances Reading for Dyslexic Children, talks about this on page 37. I talk about Dr. Roger Sperry, famous for the split brain theory in the 1960s. When we removed God from the public schools, God was giving a scientist a breakthrough for the schools. He worked with seizure patients, and he worked with the left and the right sides of the brain independently or in concert. And he told educators at his conference, if they could find a way to bring his science into the classroom, we could help kids with word blindedness. So Dr. Roger Sperry talks about the left and right angular gyrus. Nobody else is talking about that, which is why I talk about that in my doctoral research. So Dr. Sperry won a Nobel Prize 20 years later in the 1980s for his split brain theory. And what have we done with his science? So imagine the left side of the brain is the language center, but dyslexic kids read from the right side of the brain. So if you send music in the left side of the brain, in an earphone, it's going to transfer over to the right side of the brain, the right angular gyrus. And if you put spelling exercises in an earphone in the right ear, they're going to transfer to the left angular gyrus, to the language center, and strengthen it like Pilates of the brain. And we're also bypassing that central part of the brain, corpus callosum, which we call a lazy referee. So you can read about my research in The Message of Hope. I've got over 50 references to support this science. So I created curriculum, and it follows the science of reading. And I have an accompanying music app, so you don't have to listen to a CD or a tape in the olden days. God had me make the app free, so you can find it on iOS and Android, CDSM. So the research by Adam Kroon of music, neuroscience, psychology, and the psychology of well-being reports that explicit reading instruction that gives a student the ability to carefully decode, which is read words, can be difficult for dyslexics, but with accompanying music, they have a cognitive and attention advantage that can accelerate success. That's just one of the resources I have. More are on my website at dyslexia-solutions.com. But now I want to talk to you about genetic dyslexia and developmental dyslexia. In my book, Prisons of Brilliance, on page 44, I talk about genetic dyslexia only comprises 40% of the dyslexic population. The remaining 60% have developmental. And what does that mean? It means no phonics. It means parents not knowing how to read to their children when they were little. It means a child may have had substitute teachers that didn't know what they were doing, or they may have had not have the correct tools. Have you ever heard of teachers winging it in special ed? They just grab any reading books that they can, and no teacher training on dyslexia.